Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the House Committee on Innovation, Internet, and Technology. It's Monday, April 12th. I'm Rep. Deb Ruggiero, chair of the committee, with my distinguished colleagues. Apologize for the delay, but the State House had a fire drill. Fortunately, everyone is safe, and we are ready to begin our hearing. Many of my colleagues are on Memorex, if you're old enough to remember that advertising campaign, a true internet committee this afternoon. I do want to thank the technical team at the State House and our clerk, Chris O'Brien. Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Chairwoman Ruggiero.
Here.
Vice Chair Handy. Vice Chair Carson.
Here.
Representative Amore.
Here.
Representative Chippendale.
Present.
Representative Cortrin. Representative Craven. Representative Kennedy.
Present.
Representative Lima. Representative Messier. Representative Morales.
Here.
Representative Place.
Present.
Representative Shanley. Representative Tanzi.
Present.
And Representative Tabone.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one bill, H6151. It's the Wireless Telecommunications Act. The legislative synopsis on this bill online is not correct. It actually goes to another bill, not the one that's before us. This bill authorizes municipalities to regulate the construction and modification of wireless equipment based on public safety, zoning, and aesthetics. It also repeals the Small Cell Siting Act, Chapter 32 of Title 39. May I please have a motion to hold H6151 for further study?
Motion.
Okay, Rep. Morales, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a second. Okay, thank you very much. Clerk, would you take a roll vote on that, please?
Chairwoman Ruggiero.
Yes.
Vice Chair Handy. Vice Chair Carson.
Yes.
Representative Amore.
Yes.
Representative Chippendale.
Aye.
Representative Cortrin. Representative Craven. Representative Kennedy.
Yes.
Representative Lima. Representative Messier. Representative Morales.
Yes.
Representative Place.
Nay.
Representative Shanley. Representative Tanzi.
Yes.
And Representative Tabone.
Yes.
All set.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, H6151 by myself and Reps. Bennett, Parson, Morales, McEntee, Craven, and Batista authorizes municipalities, our cities and towns, to regulate wireless construction and modification of equipment for public safety, land use, zoning, and any aesthetics. It incorporates federal law, specifically the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Federal law says states and local governments cannot prohibit installation of small wireless facilities and also cannot regulate wireless based on radio frequency health concerns. That is federal law, okay? But the feds have said that cities and towns have a legitimate interest. So if a municipality complies with the process, they can regulate the manner in which the wireless equipment is constructed within a local community. For example, where the wireless facilities go, how tall, as long as the community does not prohibit. So this bill would allow cities and towns to have hearings and take input from citizens. The federal law has always said that cities and towns have a legitimate interest. It was state law that the General Assembly passed and the governor signed in 2017, the Small Cell Siting Act, which stripped towns and cities of any power, giving basically carte blanche to the telecoms to construct. So this bill rescinds the Small Cell Siting Act and reverts back to recognizing that towns and cities have a legitimate interest in zoning and safety concerns, which federal law agrees with. I do want to give a big shout out and thank you to attorney Sean Feeney. He did a real deep dive into the federal law and a great job on this draft because, again, state law in no way can usurp federal law. Also, thank you to the DPUC, the Division of Public Utilities Carriers. We engaged in numerous discussions with us on this. They are neutral because they are preempted by state law from having a regulatory role with any wireless telecommunications. So that's really the bill before us. We have 7 people who will have 2 minutes each to testify on behalf of the bill, against 4. And that's the bill before us. If anyone has any questions, or we'll just start with the first, person.
Chairwoman, Rep. Kennedy.
Yes.
So I'm curious why we're seeking to undo that particular act. I think one of the reasons when we were talking about the introduction of 5G back in 2017, the purpose of originally passing that, I think that was Representative Ucci's bill.
Yes, it
was to ensure that that newest technology was going to come to the state of Rhode Island in the form of 5G, that it would be deployed as quickly as possible on behalf of the citizens of the state of Rhode Island, and that it would be done in a fair manner so that you wouldn't have a city or a town demanding a ransom from the wireless providers in order to set up those particular 5G boxes or whatever we want to call those things on poles. They talked about co-location of those particular ones in some of the city areas so that you wouldn't have as many of them that would have to be looked at, in their various forms and structures. So I'm just curious as to why now we're looking to undo that.
It's a great question. The current has become part of our life. Wireless obviously is more broadband. 5G is still in development. It's 2 to 3 years away. And obviously 5G doesn't penetrate buildings, so it becomes 4G. There was some interest in people and communities wanting to have a voice, but what's happened is a lot of people feel the voice they want is regarding the radio frequency emissions, and that is not something that states can talk about. That is a federal law. So some of the health concerns are not part of this. So that is really it. The small cell is inconsequential, and cities and towns should have a voice as to, not just be administrative. If you read the small cell siting law, they have to just approve it, and they can go anywhere. You don't know where they're going, how much they're going off, and what neighborhood and what view they're obstructing. So I just felt for the issue of transparency and some local citizens' concerns, we drafted it, and of course, obviously had to mirror it very closely to the federal law. So I hope that answers the question. If there are no other questions, again, we have a number of concerned citizens who will be testifying about the radio frequency emissions on these wireless facilities, on telephone poles and buildings. I've mentioned it's federal law, so state and local government cannot usurp that. The 2 things the federal law says is states do not have jurisdiction and cannot regulate wireless based on the health concerns related to radio frequencies. It's really something that hopefully the Biden administration and or our U.S. Senators Reid and Whitehouse and Congressman Cicilline and Langevin will take up, because the Telecommunications Act of 1996, has not been updated for 25 years. So it's a forum for our citizens in Rhode Island to voice concerns that they have. They do not have that forum in their communities, right? Because that's what the Small Cell Siting Act says, that they're just going to go in and put them in. So let's see. Clerk, if we could at least begin our verbal testimony from some of our citizens. would you see if Angel Lopez is on the line? Angel, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Angel, welcome to the House Committee on Innovation, Internet, and Technology. You have 2 minutes to tell us your story. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Angel Lopez, and I'm from Providence. Before I begin, I attest that I am an AHANA alumni of the Boston College Carroll School of Management and that my biometric information is not for sale. I'm going to start by extending my gratitude to Chairwoman Ruggiero, who courageously assumed the role to lead this committee and agreed to discuss such a contemporary and vital opportunity for all communities in Rhode Island to thrive. Addressing this issue is necessary, given we are at the beginning of the second half of this legislative season. The existing Rhode Island general laws under Title 3932 that this bill 6151 will replace. I myself have been raising awareness about Title 3932 in the past couple of years, and based on my experience inquiring about specific co-locations around the city of Providence, I oppose 6151 and advocate for improved legislation that includes community engagement and community benefits. There is a Section 106 process within the 36 Code of Federal Regulations, Part 800, that serves as an avenue for communities to understand and engage in technological rollouts that impact their environment. This is to ensure that adverse effects are addressed during the rollout. I have not even been able to see a work permit for a co-location of a device that was, that's still outside my residence since 2017. I oppose H6151 because it fails to address the vulnerabilities the current law has created in many communities across the state. You will hear about these vulnerabilities from other folks testifying. I have 3 suggestions for improved legislation. Number 1, include a definition of public rights-of-way and clearly define, number 2, the roles and responsibilities of the primary stakeholders over public rights-of-way, creating, number 3, a community-first engagement initiative to ensure the public rights-of-way in a community are used for the benefit of the residents who live there. I look forward to discussing in details with any of you further in the near future about the solutions that address the vulnerabilities that Title 39-32 has created in our communities. I also want to note that I have a petition online asking to study the adverse effects of the rollout that was created by Title 3932 across Providence communities, and it currently has 225 signers. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Lopez, for your testimony. Members of the committee, any questions? No. Thank you very much, Mr. Lopez. That's very much appreciated. Let's move to the next person. Our guest next is Sheila Ressinger from 5G Free Rhode Island.
She's there.
Is she there, clerk?
Yes, she is.
Yes.
Oh, great. Hello, Sheila. Welcome to the committee. You have 2 minutes to share your thoughts with us, please.
Oh, thank you. Chair Ruggiero and members of the committee, my name is Sheila Ressinger from Cranston, and excuse me, I strongly oppose H6151 for the following reasons. Although H6151 would override the 2017 Small Cell Siting Act, it attempts to preempt state and local obligations to safety, which the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996 does not. Indeed, the Telecom Act's conference report expressly states that safety and other criteria must remain under the regulatory control of localities, no matter what the FCC may try to preempt. Thus, the claim that H6151 merely restates the Telecom Act is false. Further, H6151 attempts to supersede federal law. When a state decides to override federal law, presumably under the 10th Amendment, it must do so for the good of its people, not for their harm, since the 9th Amendment provides first for the people's rights above untoward federal actions. H 6151 eliminates municipalities' obligation to safety, to Rhode Island residents and our environment's protection against the harms of the pulse-modulated radio frequency microwave radiation deployed by misnamed small cell high-power antennas. Though it appears to give localities a role in considering telecom applications, it removes the federal assurance to local authorities to deny placement, construction, modification, and operations under certain conditions. Thus, H 6151, no doubt written by industry attorneys in my opinion, is plainly ultra vires. Misrepresenting the limited preemption at 47 U.S.C. Section 332C7B4, H 6151 violates the conference report on the Telecom Act and the very intent of the Communications Act of 1934 and the Telecom Act, purposed, quote, to promote the safety of life and property, unquote. Furthermore, this 1968 Public Health Service Act amendment states, quote, the Congress hereby declares that the public health and safety must be protected from the dangers of electronic product radiation, unquote. Please rewrite this bill in order to provide Rhode Islanders with a safe, secure, and actually even faster means of connecting to the Internet, wired broadband rather than wireless. Thank you, and I have also submitted written testimony where I have a lot more details about my points.
Yes, you have, Sheila, and thank you very much for that testimony and for the written testimony regarding certainly broadband versus wireless. Are there any questions for this witness from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Sheila, for joining us. And now, clerk, if we could please call on, oh, you're welcome. Beth Ann Cooley is also joining us from CTIA. Beth Ann, let us know what that is.
Hello, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Beth Cooley, and I am the Assistant Vice President of State Legislative Affairs at CTIA. CTIA is the trade association for the wireless communications industry. I respectfully testify today in opposition to 6151. A coalition letter in opposition was also submitted, noted broad industry opposition to this legislation as well. While perhaps well-intentioned, H 6151 would hamper the wireless industry's ability to continue to deploy wireless infrastructure at a time when connectivity is paramount. Rhode Island was one of the first states in the country to recognize that small wireless facilities, also known as small cells, are an important building block of 5G. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a powerful reminder of the importance of connectivity. The fact that we're having this hearing remotely is a testament to that. Nearly overnight, COVID-19 prompted sudden and significant changes in how we live, work, and educate our children. And it's been just over a year since COVID was declared a national emergency, and America's wireless networks rose to the occasion, handling an unprecedented surge in mobile voice and data traffic almost overnight. The existing small cell statute is working as it helps to accommodate that surge in mobile voice and data traffic. Verizon New England, which jointly owns the vast majority of utility poles in Rhode Island, reports that deployment of small cells on its poles has increased significantly since the small cell statute was enacted. The company has issued more than 600 pole attachment licenses for small cells since that time and has another 530 applications currently pending. This is in comparison to fewer than 200 such licenses issued in the 4 years before enactment. 6151 puts that type of investment in jeopardy by seeking to rescind the small cell statute, which, as discussed, has been working very well. There are also additional flaws in the legislation. It conflates small cells with large macro towers and subjects them to zoning, even though small cells are the size of a backpack or pizza box. This is inconsistent with federal law. The legislation also does not provide any time limits. So there are numerous failings. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify this evening, and I would welcome any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much, Beth. We appreciate that on behalf of the wireless community. Any questions for Beth? Yes, Rep. Morales, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Thank you so much for coming out and testifying. We really do appreciate the input. My question would be, wouldn't it be beneficial to the wireless industry to be able to have community engagement when it comes to their projects? It just seems a little wrong to me that we're just focused so much on efficiency and not necessarily understanding the discretion that our cities and towns have, and especially their residents, in regards to wireless development.
Absolutely. We 100% would welcome community engagement. However, what this bill does is it strips existing statute, which respectfully we argue does include community engagement in terms of time, place, and manner of small cells, by conflating small cells with those 200-foot macro towers that you see along the side of the highway, which also would solicit community feedback. So it's kind of morphing or meshing, if you will, two different policies on wireless infrastructure into sort of a one-size-fits-all approach, which in terms of federal law is inconsistent with respect to timelines and fees. And so, yes, we 110% want community involvement as we're deploying these, because we are deploying to accommodate our customers and your constituents at the end of the day.
If I could just follow very briefly. Chairwoman, thank you. So just to reiterate, it essentially sounds like enforcing and mandating community engagement would disrupt profit, hence the reason why the wireless industry would be opposed to such a piece of legislation like this. Because again, at the end of the day, this is just to increase community engagement regardless of what wireless technology we are discussing. I know you've cited several different pieces before, but again, does this just interrupt timelines and profit, or what's the reason to oppose this level of community engagement?
So again, not opposed to community engagement at all, Representative. What is inconsistent is that there are many different types of wireless infrastructure technology, but what this is seeking to do is rescind the small cell statute, where the federal government, the FCC, has recognized that small cells, from a timeline perspective and cost perspective, should be treated differently than those 200-foot macro towers, which can take many years and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to deploy. So that's at the heart of the issue, is that by essentially doing a one-size-fits-all policy for all wireless infrastructure, it's inconsistent with federal law, and ultimately is going to slow down wireless deployment at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Now, Beth, I have a question and a thought, because my understanding is the federal law states, you're right, that local and state governments cannot prohibit wireless. You are allowed to come in and put wireless facilities on telephone poles, buildings, but the Small Cell Siting Act in 2017 went beyond the federal law, because the federal law, there's a skinny walkway that says we recognize the legitimate concern of zoning boards and councils to at least have some public input. And right now, it's more of an administrative task for cities and towns to basically give a permit, carte blanche. Would you talk about that? I mean, do you actually go in to zoning and councils and speak about where these are going and how tall they'll be?
So my understanding, the way that the current Rhode Island small cell statutes work, bear in mind, Rhode Island passed before the FCC state and local small cell order, but the FCC state and local small cell order was very much advised by what states had already done. So a long-winded way of saying there is an administrative review, and a permit can be denied by a locality if the application is incomplete, if it would impede, for example, it would be in compliance with Americans for Disability Act, sidewalk width is one example. There are height limitations as well as to how tall a small cell can be. There would also be public safety issues, whereas if a small cell would block like the view of a traffic light or a stop sign, that application could also be denied. And so the shot clocks for small cells are 60 days if you're going to attach to an existing structure, or 90 days for a standalone small cell. And that's why the administrative review helps to ensure you're meeting both your state statute and the FCC rules. I hope that answered your question.
And what about some of the health concerns that some of the folks have already expressed in testimony with the radio frequency emissions on these pretty much unregulated wireless transmission facilities?
Well, Madam Chair, as I think I heard you say previously, you referenced that, in fact, regulating on the basis of RF, or radio frequency, is expressly prohibited under federal law, right? So that's Section 332C7B4, so a lot of numbers. But also, it's important to note that the consensus among health experts, which includes the American Cancer Society, the World Health Organization, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, is that the weight of scientific evidence shows no known adverse health effects to humans from exposure to both wireless antennas or devices. So, looking at those two items together, that, CTIA is not a scientific agency, and we defer to those that are. And according to the health experts, both nationally and internationally, there are no known health effects to humans from exposure to wireless antennas or devices.
I would love to see some of that research if you don't mind sending it to myself and the committee. That would be great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Beth Cooley from the committee? No? Okay. Thank you very much for joining us. Next, we have Michelle Cinquagrano from Verizon, and she too is opposed. Michelle?
Should be there.
I'm here.
Welcome to the Committee on Innovation, Internet, and Technology. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. Michelle Cinquagrano from Verizon. Sorry for my delay. I was listening to the testimony before me, before putting this on mute. As you've heard from Beth Cooley, I won't go into any more detail. We did sign on to the coalition letter that you have. But I would like to give a little bit of a brief history when we talk about the small cell siting bill that was passed in 2017. So it was a culmination of a very comprehensive and collaborative process that took place over 2 sessions. The industry worked with the Division of Public Utilities, the leagues of cities and towns, and the House and Senate leadership. So based on the passing of this legislation, for Verizon anyway, Providence was announced as one of our first 20 5G cities even before Boston. And we feel that if this bill is passed as it is written, it would set the state back years. And I also want to let you know that it just doesn't impact 5G. It impacts what we're doing with small cell deployment that increases coverages for our 4G LTE network. So we're trying to fill in those dead zones with small cells, and this legislation would impact that as well. So Rhode Island has a long history of establishing forward-thinking policies on technology deployment, and as a result, the state leads the nation in access to advanced fiber-based broadband services. In order to maintain and extend that lead in the realm of the wireless broadband network, the state policy framework must encourage ongoing investment in wireless broadband technology, and for those reasons, I respectfully oppose House Bill 6151. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Sorry. Yes, Michelle, so the 2017 bill that we passed based on 5G, and you're right, Providence was a test market, and now it's 2021 and 5G is still in development and it's 2 to 3 years away. Isn't it true that back in 2006, didn't Verizon come before the DPUC saying that they were going to come into the state to do FTTP, fiber to the premises, and that was when you started FiOS, and that is broadband. And now somehow we've shifted 7 or 8 years later to the wireless. Is there any opportunity for you to get back into broadband to connect residents and businesses to the 48 strands of fiber optic we have running through the state, where we're only using 10 strands, the meds and eds?
So I think you're talking about the Ocean network, Chair, for that?
Yes, I'm talking about the BTOP funding that the state received back in 2010. You're right, 21 million from the feds and 11 million from the state. And, I thought when I chaired the Broadband Commission in 2015, I had asked Verizon, because you were doing FiOS, which was broadband, it was giving an opportunity for 8 communities, including a Picnic Island and Jamestown, a choice for broadband. And that has sort of gone by the wayside, and Verizon has abandoned FiOS and is now doing so-called 5G and wireless. So I'm just curious if we're ever going to get back to fiber optic broadband, which is what wireless needs in order to actually do their business.
Sure. So let me unpack that a little bit. So Verizon, we have a landline company, which you talked about, FiOS and FTTP, and we do have that in the state, and we have committed to where we sought application licenses and franchise licenses, because in Rhode Island you have to apply by service area. And back in 2006 when we started, people were interested in triple plays, right? They were interested in voice, video, and data. I think that we've seen a shift over the years that people are doing more streaming. So really people care more about internet and broadband internet more than anything else. On the other side, we have for Verizon our wireless network. So I represent both sides of the company. And we still are making sure that we are upgrading our copper network to fiber. We are always looking at areas where we do not have Fios, and what is the possibility of upgrading our copper network to fiber. I don't have an answer for you on, right now we are not expanding our Fios product or our Fios network where we already have it and where we've committed to complete the build. And on the wireless side, we have been deploying 5G, and it's actually active in many different communities, including Providence, but the Providence market. So it's two different things, and we use fiber to obviously as a backbone for our 5G network and our cellular network in general.
Right. Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to talking to you more about all of this, and I really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon.
I'm here for you, Chair. If you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to talk to you about it.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Michelle from anybody else on the committee? I don't see any, so thank you. Next, we have Brian Daniels from the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns joining us. Brian, are you there? Welcome to the House Committee on Innovation, Internet, and Technology.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is Brian Daniels. I'm the Executive Director of the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns, and we appreciate Chairwoman Ruggiero's sponsorship of this bill, which we support. It would restore greater local control over the siting and permitting of wireless technology equipment. You've heard some of the backstory about why the Small Cell Siting Act was passed in 2017. Michelle referenced that the League of Cities and Towns was part of that conversation. The main goal was making sure that there were not 39 different approaches to permitting small cell equipment in Rhode Island. So there were we did agree with some standardization. However, the final bill that came out and was enacted into law, we feel that the permitting fees were too low compared to other jurisdictions, and the timeframes for approving applications were too fast. And so this bill addresses both of those issues. One other thing that we particularly appreciate with this bill in light of the Small Cell Siting Act has to do with municipal poles. And as some members of the committee may be aware, many communities in Rhode Island have purchased their streetlights and they have converted them to energy-efficient LEDs, and that has allowed them to save taxpayers a great deal of money. One problem we had with the Small Cell Siting Act is it basically would force a municipality to accept a small cell equipment on that pole, and they wouldn't be able to do the studies necessary to find out if there was any interference based on electricity draw or things like that. So this bill specifically allows permit and application fees to cover the cost of any types of studies. So that's something that we appreciate. And as the chair referenced, the bill really just focuses on local requirements on land use, public safety, zoning, including aesthetics and landscaping. Just as you would put any other public facility, you'd have to comply with those. It does not, as the chair has referenced, does not deal with the radio frequency emissions. That's not something that local governments are allowed to address. But we do appreciate that the bill addresses some of the shortfalls that we found from the Small Cell Siting Act, and we urge the committee to support it.
Brian, thank you very much for your testimony. You mentioned the streetlights, the municipal streetlights, which I also sponsored. Is there any way, are you saying that this, the small cells, the wireless transmission facilities that go on these telephone poles could impact a municipality's streetlight program?
There are two components. One is the liability component, just making sure if a municipality owns the streetlight and the pole, if something goes down, they need to make sure that it is replaced. also, if there is third-party equipment on that, it complicates that that relationship and that management of the pole. And the other issue that I have heard, I'm not quite sure of the technical impacts, but if there is an electricity wire that's going to that street light, it has to make sure that it is sufficient to support any other equipment. So if there's any other municipal equipment on there and then you add small cell equipment, it could lead to power challenges. I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm not exactly sure of the details, but I have heard that is one possible concern from some of our members.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Brian Daniels from the League of Cities and Towns? Seeing none, thank you, Brian, for your testimony. Next, we will hear from Steve Dahl, Rhode Island for a Safer Technology. Steve, are you on the line? And welcome to the House Committee on Innovation, Internet, and Technology. You have the floor.
Yes, this is Steve Dahl. Hi, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Stephen Dahl of Kingston, Rhode Island, 02881. I'm here to voice my strong opposition to House Bill 6151, which says it will regulate wireless service for zoning and public safety, but in fact the bill completely fails to protect the public. Enactment of this bill will affect my health adversely because I have a disability caused by wireless radiation. A stay-at-home dad, I worked 20 hours a week at the Peacedale Library's circulation desk from December 2015 to May 2016. I enjoyed the work until I began to get health problems. Insomnia, brain fog, dyslexia, memory loss, anxiety, heart palpitations, stomach cramps, flushing, inflammation, eye pressure, headaches, and irritability. Finally, I realized that my workstation was 10 feet from the whole library Wi-Fi transmitter. We did not have Wi-Fi at home, however, so I was able to tell the difference. I had replaced Wi-Fi with hardwired Ethernet connections because the American Academy of Pediatrics had implored the Federal Communications Commission to update its inadequate 1996 radio frequency radiation standards, which it still refuses to do, being a captured agency, as the Harvard Safra J. Center on Ethics has reported. This bill does not allow any regulation of wireless radiation. Page 4 of this bill in the Public Safety chapter says, for the purposes of this chapter, public safety shall not include requirements relating to radio frequency emissions of wireless facilities. This negligence comes at the price of health. Radio frequency radiation has been proven to cause clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage to by our nation's gold standard lab, the National Toxicology Program. That cell phone study is one of the thousands of peer-reviewed medical studies showing biological harm from radio frequency radiation, which you can read about at the Environmental Health Trust website. Instead of protecting the public, this bill upholds a corrupt federal law, the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which attempts to prohibit the mention of health and objections to siting towers, and in doing so violates civil and human rights. It is currently being challenged in court. The Rhode Island Constitution demands we protect the public from harm. You need an attorney who understands wireless legislation to help you write the bill, one who does not have a conflict of interest, such as having worked for Verizon, Cox, National Grid, or PPL. Since the Public Utilities Commission already has members with vested interests, they are not a good choice for protecting our rights. Rewrite this bill, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your testimony. Again, I just want to reiterate that states do not have jurisdiction and cannot regulate wireless based on health concerns with radio frequencies. That is federal law. I appreciate a number of people testifying who have health conditions. But thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Madam, we cannot be complicit in crimes against humanity.
Are there any questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Steve. And our last witness this afternoon is Claire Stedemuller. That's correct? Hope I pronounced that correct. Claire, are you there?
Oh, yes. Hello. Yes, I am.
Thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Ruggiero and committee members. I am Claire Stockmuller of Cranston. I strongly oppose H6151 because it jeopardizes Rhode Islanders and our natural environment and violates our rights under the U.S. and Rhode Island Constitution. legislators must review at 5gfreeri.com and mdsafetech.org the amply documented harms of so-called small wireless telecommunications facilities to counter Ms. Cooley's assertion that there are no such harms. 5G incurs excessive spending on technology that harms us. Who benefits from that? 5G exposes Rhode Island to liability. Who owns the liability? 5G is a big energy guzzler and is incompatible with Green New Deal policies. H6151 violates the United States Constitution's First Amendment with loss of privacy due to warrantless surveillance. H6151 violates the Fourth Amendment right to be secure in my person and in my home, and the Ninth Amendment's provision for individual rights. H6151 violates the Rhode Island Constitution, Section 6,
30 seconds.
the right of the people to be secure in their persons against unreasonable searches and seizures. A small wireless telecommunication facility on my telephone pole would enable 24/7 surveillance and make my data vulnerable to theft. Private property shall not be taken for public uses, as Section 16 violates Section 19, the quartering of soldiers, as 5G enables surveillance by the military. Fiber to the premises has none of these awful, unjust threats, and I appreciate Madam Chair's inquiry about fiber to the premises, which is what we at 5G Free Rhode Island have been advocating for. I do have a suggestion that committee members work with our U.S. senators and congressmen to remedy the severe flaws of the referenced offensive 1996 Act rather than continuing to acquiesce to it. And in closing, I will say that the small size of the WTF's antenna should not be equated to the small impact of pulsed microwave radiation at 60 gigahertz, as was presented tonight with the comparison to large antennas. So I do certainly appreciate the opportunity to express this, and I do certainly appreciate that Chair Ruggiero did point out that we have fiber to the premises, which has none of the harms that have been well documented of 5G, doesn't use all the energy, can't go out in a power outage. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Claire, for your testimony. Are there any questions for this witness from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Claire, for that tutelage and that engaging testimony. Most appreciated, and your point is well taken. This really is a federal issue. The Small Cell Siting Act, which came through Rhode Island, went through many states almost simultaneously. I appreciate everyone's input. It was a wonderful conversation. Let me read into the record the written testimony we have. Wendy Fashon is opposed, concerned with 5G. Sam Parrish, opposed to any bills that expand radio frequency emissions. Lori Ludwig, John Holscher, Gene Williams, all opposed to 5G. I just want the record to reflect that. And that will conclude the hearing on H6151. Doesn't seem likely that it'll be on the House floor, but it certainly was a very interesting conversation. I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. The Innovation Internet Technology Committee. I'm Deb Ruggiero. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you very much on that. Have a good evening, and we'll see you soon. Stay well. Thank you.